Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Talkwalker interview. My name is John Leland, and I'm president of combridges.com, an internet marketing strategist. And I'm here today with David Drake of narrativecoaching.com. Good morning, David.
Good morning, John.
How you doing? So we're going to talk today about fun and storytelling, among other things. David is really a coach's coach in this world where coaching is becoming so dynamic and really kind of valuable for lots of executives and lots of entrepreneurs. David is someone who trains coaches, has written several books about coaching, and his coaching company, as you can see from his URL, is narrativecoaching.com. And so this whole idea of storytelling, which is really kind of a hot buzzword, if you will,
It is.
particularly in the content marketing world, is really part of the fabric of how you work with people in being more effective, correct?
Yes.
Maybe you could fill me in just, or fill all of us in a little bit about how does narrative become part of coaching?
Well, I observed years ago that one of the easiest ways to understand a client was to get them to tell a story about themselves or a story about the situation that they were facing. And what I've learned over the years is that all the material they're going to need to understand how to resolve that issue is present in their attempt to tell a story about it. So you can listen for the story, listen for gaps in their thinking or gaps in their connection, gaps in their authenticity, their own desires, which is what drives the story. And so we've just developed a way to, in a really fine level, listen to the nuances of people's stories, reflect that back to them, and use that narrative material to help them learn about themselves.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, that's kind of, we're certainly familiar with all the different self-help paradigms about how important the way we think is.
Hmm.
And that seems like a very powerful extension of what you're talking about. I'm doing something called the New Media, New Marketing Playground, as you know,
Yes.
and I think that one of the fun aspects that we're having as we experiment and give people the place to experiment. The reason I called it a playground is because I'm trying to make internet marketing. I guess I am making internet marketing fun for people by giving them permission to play
Yes.
and make mistakes and experiment. Is the how does the whole idea of playing and experimenting tie over into this notion of a narrative or storytelling as a way to be more effective in the world and in particular to be more effective when you're communicating online?
Well, I think it's a really important piece, John. I know that working a lot with adults, sometimes we get a very narrow view of what learning is. But if you look at children, when children are playing a game, whether it's a sport or a board game or a fantasy game, they go all in. Their whole bodies in, their spirits in, their minds in, their hearts in, and and we believe that a lot of the values that we can observe in children would be really helpful for adults. And one of the things that adults really struggle with is the fear of making a mistake.
Yeah,
So we,
that's so true.
because we don't look stupid, and so, but if you don't make mistakes, it's impossible to learn. And we don't criticize our children, particularly when they're young, when they're learning how to walk. They make lots of mistakes. That's how their body learns how to walk. And so we try to create a safe space in which people can, within safety and structure, make lots of mistakes to undo some of their bad habits, to bump into other parts of themselves, to try things they might not be confident enough to try in public, but to really just play with how else could I be in the world? How else could I relate to people? How else could I show up? And so we use some overt, playful activities, but more largely we just use the spirit of play, like you would in your playground. Let's go learn a few things and then go try them.
And be
And,
willing to make mistakes. I mean, that
and
whole area of experimentation, is it no wonder you and I are getting along so well, and I guess by full disclosure, you and I
yes,
are new friends,
yes,
but we're really kind of enjoying the process of exploring the things that we're talking about now.
yes.
And it's been a real joy for me to have this New Media, New Marketing Playground
Mm,
community and encourage people to do online video and learn from expressing themselves and telling their story through online video, for example, or through social media graphics.
yes.
But if you don't do it, there's no way to learn. There's no way to get better at it, and nobody has become, completely masterful at any of this new media, new marketing stuff because it's too new. It's all experimental. We're all learning all the time.
You
So
bet.
this adventure of play is just becoming crucial.
Yes.
So in fact, it was underscored. A resource that I'm recommending to people these days. There's a guy named Joe Polizzi of the Content Marketing Institute, and he has a new book called Epic Content Marketing, and he talked within there about levels of content
Mm,
marketing, which was at the base level of a kind of content aware, and then there's this next level of thought leader that many of us kind of have aspired to. That's been a buzzword, but he puts above that storyteller, and that's really kind of somebody who, as you just expressed
yeah.
it, is full in, is
Yes.
telling their story online, whether it's on Instagram, YouTube, or via their blog, what have you. And that sounds like, that again, you're doing it from a coaching paradigm. I'm doing it from, how important is authenticity and joy, and being in the flow with regard to marketing. But there's
Yeah.
clearly a big overlap, that storytelling maybe is really kind of the ultimate form of marketing communications now.
Well, and you think about, in another domain, the major religions of the world at their origins were all based on simple stories because
Mhm.
they translate over time across large audiences. They're very personal. They're very familiar. They're just really engaging. And I find oftentimes in my world, working a lot with leaders and managers, that they try to make all this too complicated. And so when we do our narrative leadership programs, which is basically helping leaders to understand what is my take on our corporate vision, what is my belief about what's important about the business we're in. A lot of that comes from within themselves. And how do I make that as simple and as clear and as compelling as possible? And what we find is that as people strip away all the stuff they think they're supposed to say and all these other things, they just get down to that heartfelt message about this is why we work those long hours, this is why we're in the business we're in. And it's just really moving to employees to be able to know this, this person's done their homework. They've gone
Mhm.
all in as a leader, and I'm willing to come follow them. Um, so I think
I,
it's really
I,
important.
and I think that connects back with one of my other core values, which is authenticity. Because
Mm,
I love that you mentioned the shoulds and the have
yeah.
tos, and I think that there's a lot of people in marketing communications. They really kind of are looking from the point of view of clever, and or
Oh
how
yeah.
can we manipulate a message in order to get the result that we want. When ultimately it's really, like you said, stripping away the shoulds and the have tos and the I gotta do this, and getting down to what do you really care about? What's really important to you? And when you get into your heart in that way and are talking about something, for me, I'll just say the reason I'm having this conversation with you is because I think online communications and all these incredible new tools and social media channels and so forth represent an opportunity, but one that's frequently abused. And so
Yeah.
my mission is about authenticity, ease, fun. Let's do it from the heart.
Yeah.
If you're not talking about something you care about that matters to you, nobody's going to care,
Right.
no matter how clever or manipulative you are.
Yeah. Well, and ironically, I'll just sort of one of the learning pieces for me in this, which, it's a bit of a reveal, but also is really quite tied to this topic, is when I went through a really difficult period in my own personal life a couple of years ago. One of the questions I asked myself is, what if somebody passed a law tomorrow that the word narrative and the word coaching were forbidden to ever be used again? Would I change my business? And I realized, no, this is who I am, and it doesn't matter what it's called in a way. I've very carefully branded this over time. I said, but it's really just a convenient mechanism to explain what I do, but in reality, I do more than that. And so again, I think it's just getting past the things we think we're supposed to be doing. And I think, as in your industry as well as in mine, coaching is changing pretty significantly as it becomes more mainstream. It's more embedded now in a lot of organizations, and so a lot of us, are sort of thinking, well, what's the next iteration of coaching? And I believe that a lot of it's going to be around authenticity and accountability, and all the other stuff's going to fall away a bit because it now will become part of the common vocabulary, and the scale of issues we need to address in your world and in my world are so much greater now. We need a new caliber of provider. We need a new caliber of thinking about how we're going to do that, which ironically is not more complicated. It's actually simpler, as you were saying.
Well, but I agree on it. But
Yeah,
it's simpler for the courageous executive or the courageous entrepreneur
yeah,
that really is willing to pull back those layers.
yeah.
One of the reasons that I started talking to you, frankly, was around this question of authenticity, because I
Mm,
think that when I call it authentic voice. How do you find your authentic voice? That to me is, I know it's a big question, but I'll throw it to you just the
yeah.
same. Is like, when you're an entrepreneur and you're looking at how do you find your way, what do I really want to do? Are there a couple tips that you can offer in this short form interview about how someone, whether they're working for a large organization or a small entrepreneur, can really engage in that inquiry in an authentic way and get traction around, who they really are and what they really want to say, and what's calling them?
So there is two simple processes we use that to get at your question, John. So one is, particularly in the West, we tend to live most of our life in our head, but our bodies actually remember lots about our stories. And so we do a very simple exercise where we help people sort of tap into their head, but also their heart and their sort of hara or their gut instinct, as well as their hips, kind of what's the motion that wants to happen. And what we find is that when people feel stuck in a story and less authentic, it's because they're stuck in their head. When they start to really open up their hearts, what does my heart really feel, or what does my connection to somebody else feel, then more of their voice and their self becomes available. And they're saying with their, we have as much neural activity in our gut area as we do in our head, which most people don't understand. So there's a lot of knowing here that we put away. We hold, suck it in, and we hold it. So we teach people how to access that, so they get the whole story. And the second thing that we do is that we know from the research now that when you activate certain moods or states in your mind, it activates different kinds of stories.
Hmm.
And sometimes that's a sort of a vicious cycle where, if you feel a bit down, you remember other bad luck things or bad moments, and so it sort of spirals down. But you also can use it to spiral up. And so we teach people, for example, to quiet themselves and remember one of the best days of their life and really be with that. What was it like? What did it feel like? Who were you with? What were you doing? And it just fundamentally alters their mental state and their way of being. We ask them to share that with a colleague, and it's just so moving to them. And then we ask them, what would it be like to live that way more often? And you just see people's eyes just get as big as saucers. They think, oh my gosh, I've been living so small. But hearing this one memory or this one story, I know I have so much more in me. Why am I not living that way more often? And then we do some coaching pieces about what it would take for them to live that way more often. And
Awesome.
so, yeah,
Cool. Well, we could go on for a long time, and I think
yeah,
we will be doing more. But within this format, this
sure.
is a series of interviews that I created called Talk Walkers, and you
Hmm.
clearly qualify, David. I really appreciate you taking the time. And if you
Sure.
want more information about David and his work, narrativecoaching.com is where to go. And if you want more information about my playground or other marketing services, branding, and internet marketing strategy, combridges.com. So click on contact, and I'll get your inquiry and we can talk about it. Or if you want the playground specifically, combridges.com/playground. And David, anything else you want to say, or thank you so much for your time?
No, I just appreciate it very much, and I think play is just an underrated aspect of all of our lives that we need to build in more often in order to be able to really learn and adapt to the times that we live in. And narratives and coaching are some tools we can use to help us do that.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I'll throw in at the end, because this is a huge subject. We're going to come
Yeah,
back to it again and again. I know within the playground and the consulting that I do, it's always about looking at the core message. I like Simon Sinek's work about start with why. It's like
yeah,
what is that all-in feeling? And I know that
yeah.
that at the same time, there's so much work to do in terms of peeling back the layers. And I love
Mm,
what you said about getting into the body and the heart and all the way down into your gut, as opposed to always living up in the head.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
this is great stuff.
All
More to
right.
come. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
watching,
John.
all of you out there. You're welcome. And more Talk Walker interviews coming. It's going to become a regular series. It's moving into a podcast mode. and this is going to be an ongoing thing. So look for more Talk Walkers. Thank you again, David Drake, narrativecoaching.com, and I'm John Leland, combridges.com, and we'll see you next time.